Hey guys, Naterz here, and today I am going to shy away from my usual style of videos. Typically, I will talk about a genre of characters that could get into MultiVersus or a standalone character. But in today's video, I will be going over stages that we could see end up in MultiVersus. I think that stages are a great way to see a franchise represented in MultiVersus that does not have a character with fantastic moveset potential. That being said, I also think that every series that is in the game should at least have some sort of stage at some point. So before I get into new franchises, I will briefly go over current franchises that are represented in MultiVersus but don't already have a stage. Of the 16 franchises that are currently in MultiVersus, only 6 of them do not have stages. Those being Beetlejuice, The Matrix, Friday the 13th, The Iron Giant, Looney Tunes, and Tom and Jerry. I have seen media from all of these except for Friday the 13th. That said, it's been a heck of a long time since I have watched The Iron Giant. I mostly have ideas for all of these though. Let's start with Beetlejuice. Firstly, I do have to say that I have not yet been able to see the new Beetlejuice movie, and I'd imagine that if they were to make a Beetlejuice stage, they probably would make it from the new movie. It could be fun, though, to have a stage in the desert area, and have a sandworm come up and temporarily be a platform. I think that it could also be fun if there was a stage that could take place in the mini little diorama that is in the Mateland's attic. As for The Matrix, I have 2 ideas. I only ever really have watched the first film, so that is where my ideas come from. Firstly, I think that the rooftop where the iconic scene of Neo getting shot happened could be a lot of fun. This rooftop is mostly flat though, so some creative liberties may have to be taken. As for the other stage that I thought of, I think that they could try to do something with the subway scene for a stage. Maybe a train could actually come in and be a temporary platform or something. I think that it has a lot of potential. For Friday the 13th, I think that Camp Crystal Lake is what makes the most sense. They can probably pick and choose what section of the camp to use, though I'd imagine that the lake would have to be a part of it somehow. I'd also imagine that a scrapyard would make a good Iron Giant map. You could probably take some creative liberties and make it a pretty neat stage. I'd imagine that it would look fun visually and become a fun stage to fight on. If the Iron Giant weren't already in the game, I'd say that it would be neat to have him as a stage hazard or something. That said, the sizing would be weird and it would be odd to play as the Iron Giant on a map. Looney Tunes is a tough one because there is just so much potential for a stage. You could have the woods with a duck season sign on the tree and an Elmer Fudd reference, and you could have a stage that takes place on Mars and references a Duck Dodgers episode, and a Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote map could be neat because of the canceled movie. It would allow the coyote to have the spotlight again. I'd also really love to have a map that takes place in the mad scientist's lair who created Gossamer. Looney Tunes has so many possibilities, and I am looking forward to seeing what they do create stage-wise in the future. The final franchise is Tom and Jerry. The first thought that comes to my mind is a backyard stage. Have Spike appear in it, and his doghouse be a platform that you can jump on. I think that Spike is the big thing missing from Tom and Jerry, and having him as a background character on a stage would complete that. I'm sure that the devs could take some creative liberties and make it a fun stage to play on. With those out of the way, I can now go over other franchises and try to be a bit more creative. With this list, I will only be talking about movies with one exception at the very end. I think that if I were trying to get stages into the game, I'd probably go with what is popular. So let's head over and look at Warner Brothers' top grossing movies. Now, there are a lot of things here, so I want to make a list of the top 20 franchises from this list. Firstly, Barbie recently became their top grossing movie. Then there's a Harry Potter movie, some DC, a lot more of Harry Potter with some Hobbit films sprinkled in, Inception, Fantastic Beasts, and so on. At the end, we end up with this list. I included 21 films because one of them is a movie that was only released in China, from my understanding, so I'd imagine that they would probably not choose that for the game. But let's refine this list a little bit. Firstly, DC already has a map in the game, so let's get rid of that. We already went over the Matrix earlier, so we can get rid of that as well. I also really don't see them adding any characters based off of war movies. If it's like a sci-fi war movie, then okay, but if it's an actual war movie from previous wars that have happened, then I just don't really see it happening. So that gets rid of American Sniper and Dunkirk. Then we are left with this list here. 16 of the top grossing Warner movies. I'll be selecting a stage for all of them. Firstly, starting with Barbie. A while back, MultiVersus made a series of Twitter posts called What Happened in the Off-Season. For one of these posts, they referenced Barbie, saying that the MultiVersus cast saw the hit movie of the summer. Then in the background you could clearly see the Mojo Dojo Casa house. So I think that the house would make a pretty neat stage. In Smash, there is a stage called Tomodachi Life, and I'd imagine that the Casa house could be similar. You could jump between platforms of the house, and maybe the slide could be incorporated somehow. I think that it could be a fun stage, and I am kind of hoping that we get to see Ken in the game in the future. So having a stage come along with him would be pretty neat. After Barbie is Harry Potter, and I'll be honest, I've never seen a Harry Potter movie, and I don't really ever plan on seeing one either. That said, from what little I do know, I guess you could make a stage that takes place in Hogwarts. The name alone would attract players, I'm sure. I do wish I had more to say about Harry Potter because it is such a big series, but I just don't care much about it. I know that there are a lot of people out there who do though, so if you have an idea about a Harry Potter stage, be sure to let me know in the comments. Next is The Hobbit, which I also haven't watched. I watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy a while back and liked it, so I have wanted to watch The Hobbit. That said, the movies are pretty dang long, and I just haven't had the chance to do so. As for a stage, I think that the dev team could come up with a really beautiful stage of Hobbiton, where Frodo is from. So I'd probably make that the stage to rep The Hobbit. I am sure that there are a ton of other choices as well though, so the devs really could choose what they wanted to go with. After The Hobbit is Inception, and I actually think that Inception could be a super neat stage. I think that the stage could start as the Snow Fortress. They could choose where to make the stage of that scene. It could be inside the fortress or outside, either way. Then, when the first player dies, it transforms into the hotel. For those who haven't seen Inception, you are probably confused, so allow me to quickly explain. In Inception, there are basically these dream worlds that feel like reality to the people in them, but are actually not. But the dreams can be controlled. So unless you are the one controlling, you most likely do not know that you are dreaming. It is pretty fuzzy, but if you are in a dream, you can dream in that dream. This can happen 3 times. So in the movie, the third dream is the Snow Fortress. Then once you die in the dream, you wake up and it ends. So I think that the first player that dies can then have the stage lock onto them. Each time they die, the stage goes to the previous dream state from the movie. So it goes from the Snow Fortress to the hotel to the van chase. I think this would be a perfect translation of the movie and would be such a neat stage for the game. Fantastic Beasts is a movie that I have wanted to watch for quite some time, mainly because I like the little beasts that are in it, and I think they look kind of cute. It technically is a part of the Harry Potter world, but I decided to leave it as its own thing. I actually have no ideas for stages. I mean, the city that the movie takes place in could work, I guess. Or maybe players could fight on a giant beast. I'm really not too sure. Dune is actually a really interesting movie, and one that I saw a while back. It actually took me a bit to get into the movie, so I don't remember a ton from it. I know, though, that the desert is a big part of the movie. So maybe there could be a stage similar to the one that I thought of for Beetlejuice. Funnily enough, Dune also has its own sandworms, so you can have pretty much the same exact concept that I made for Beetlejuice. Have a stage that takes place in the desert, and have a sandworm come in at random for a temporary platform. As for it, I thought that the house could be a pretty neat stage, similar to the Mojo Dojo Casa house that I mentioned earlier. But I'd imagine that they probably wouldn't want 2 house stages. I think that it could also be neat if the stage was in the cistern that the final battle takes place in. It could also include the large scrap pile, as well as the mini carnival section that Pennywise dances in. Gravity is a movie that I actually have never seen, so I was a bit surprised to see it on this list. From my understanding though, the movie mainly takes place on a space shuttle. So I think that if any kind of stage was possible, the space shuttle would have to be the one that they go with. I definitely will have to watch this movie sometime though, because it does look pretty interesting. Wonka was a movie that I really enjoyed, but I had no idea that it actually did so well in the box office. There is a lot of stage possibilities from the movie, but I think that you could make a stage with Willy's Candy Shop in it, and have the tree be a platform that you can jump on. It's simple, but I think it would represent the movie well. If we were talking about the original Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory movie, obviously his shop with the chocolate river and whatnot would make for a good stage as well, and would probably arguably be more iconic. The Hangover is a movie that I have heard of, but I had no idea that it was such a high-grossing film. I know absolutely nothing about this film, so I'm not even sure what stage idea to throw out there. I'm not sure that the premise of the movie is something that they would want to include in the game anyway. I actually really enjoyed the movie I Am Legend and had no idea it did so well at the box office. If it were up to me, I'd probably make the stage the aircraft landing spot where Neville plays golf. You could have the plane be a platform and whatnot. In the background, you could be able to see the deserted buildings. Really, this movie has a lot of areas that could have stages made from it, and it would just ultimately come up with the devs to make the ultimate final decision. Ready Player One is such a fun movie, and has insane stage potential in it. The first thought that comes to my mind would have to be the racing scene. I think that it could be a neat stage, leaping on cars and having King Kong be a stage hazard. In reality though, they could take like any scene from the movie and make a really neat stage from it. I've mentioned quite a bit that I really like the MonsterVerse films. Currently, Godzilla x Kong is the highest grossing film of the bunch, with Kong Skull Island right behind it, and the first Godzilla movie a few spots behind that. So I think that we could get stages from both universes. Skull Island is the obvious one. You could have Skullcrawlers as hazards, the boat Hank made at the edge of the map, and maybe have the Iwi town in it as well. I think that it could be a pretty neat stage. Godzilla is a bit more difficult for me, as most of his movies just take place in the city or even underwater, which doesn't really work. I guess there could be some sort of city map that could happen. I do think that having Middle Earth be a stage could be super neat as well. Sherlock Holmes is actually a movie that I own but haven't been able to watch yet. It looks really fun to me. I guess the stage could take place in London somewhere, as that's where his home is. I really don't have too many ideas though, and probably won't until I get to watch the movies, which I hope to do so soon. The Meg would obviously be a water stage, where you fight on the Meg itself. I haven't watched the Meg, but I've seen a couple scenes. I'd imagine that you could jump from the Meg to a boat or something. You really would only see the top of the Meg, but maybe you could get eaten by the Meg if you're not careful when jumping from the Meg to the boat. I think that the Meg idea is a perfect example of a movie that is popular but doesn't really have a character that could be well represented. So give the Meg a stage. I think that it would fit perfectly. Twister is the last movie from this list that I will talk about. I think that there could be a stage that takes place inside of a tornado. You use cars and other objects caught in the tornado as platforms. Periodically, those objects will change, and if you do not time your jump right when they start to change, then you will risk dying by falling. I think this is a fun stage idea and would represent a really neat movie. The last stage that I want to mention is Belle Reve. Belle Reve was in the Suicide Squad, and now it is also in the Creature Commandos. I've been really enjoying Creature Commandos, and I'd love to see a stage get in from it. I think that Belle Reve would be a fun way to include two series that would be fun. I think that about wraps it up for this video though. I definitely have a lot easier time coming up with moves for characters, but stages are an important aspect of a platform fighter. If you have any stage ideas, I'd love to read them in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. It encourages me to make future content, and I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.